Hey everybody, welcome to Pealed Back's LiveCast Conversations with, as always, I'm your host, Gene the Coactive Coach, and this is episode 84. In episode 84, we are featuring Miguel Baumann. He is fascinated by the endless possibilities that human beings and digital technology can achieve together. After setting up several startups with a mixed bag of successes and failures along the way in multiple countries, he joined Philips to lead digital teams. He thrives to challenge teams and individuals to fly beyond what they thought was possible. Miguel coaches leaders in tech on topics including personal growth, authentic leadership, and connection with themselves and their teams. He focuses today on working through embodiment and somatic coaching. He loves the neuroscience brings body and mind together and is using these insights in his work as a coach. Miguel, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me. Hi.
Oh, you're very welcome. So these words probably cannot do you and your journey justice. So let's kind of jump into it. Tech and leadership, what kind of got you started down those paths?
I think the tech part was just after university, I needed a job and it wasn't easy, and tech was booming, and I was just like, yeah, sure, let's get started. I think 3 months into my first job, I asked my manager, I said, like, I don't understand how this whole online thing and tech world works.
Yeah,
And I think I should get a different job. And I was like, no, give it some time. And after a couple more months, I was just like, okay, I got this now a little bit. I understand how it works.
yeah.
But it was more like a coincidence, I would say. And the leadership
Okay.
part was much more of a, like, not, I want to say scripted, but kind of like like a work of conscious developing and exploring and looking at different angles and talking with different people, and just
Right.
like a step-by-step approach of figuring things out.
So it's just kind of this example of as you start to explore yourself and you were drawn to that and being part of teams, I'm assuming from the write up and everything is that's was were you always attracted to working in teams and kind of stepping into that like leadership role?
Like looking back, yes, but in the moments and when I was growing up, I mean, I always took initiative. I always got people together. It just happened. It just came
Yeah.
naturally to me, and then I spoke with people, and then all of a sudden, it was a team, and then we did stuff together. That's kind of like how it always went. But in the moment, it never felt like, oh, I'm being like in a leadership position or something like that. And I think what also connected to that is kind of like how the perception of a leader has shifted, or what makes a leader. It used to be
Mm.
back then, like 20, 30 years ago, or still sometimes today, I meet this image of it has to be this charismatic, bold leader that's kind of like 50s and gray hair and typically a male. Like I
Yeah.
still kind of like run into that, and but there's this different perspective of just standing up and taking responsibility and doing what feels right in that moment, and just like with
Yeah.
energy moving things forward, which is also a form of leadership in that sense.
Oh, big time. There's the the title authority that you get as a leader because some and we'll call that the boss, and then there's just
Yeah.
showing up and like being able to get people to come together, sync up on those values, and kind of be the person that is like, hey, we're gonna go do some cool stuff. And you don't always need to be like the loudest and most charismatic, but like I suspect from what I'm hearing from this is, if I'm reading it right, is there's some like caring for the people and like wanting to bring everybody along on that journey is gives you much more of what it means to be a leader in this day and age than what it might have been like 20, 30, and much many more years ago.
Yeah, 30 years ago, I would not have ever dared to say like I would be a leader in that circumstance. But now yeah, I'm comfortable saying that and seeing that as well.
Yeah.
Um, and I think something also I have learned is kind of that when you say like speaking up and bringing people together, there's also that sense of um, that one-on-one leadership. That's kind of like you have the kind of team working with the team as a whole,
Yeah.
and then you have like the one-on-one connections. And that's
Right.
also part of my strength, is really like building those and bringing people, motivating them towards the whole team mission and vision.
Right. So there's a component of like is that idea of like inherently working on that relationship with other people was that thing that kind of came naturally to you, and then all of a sudden you realized, oh, I can kind of do this as a bit of a career?
Yeah, I think so. I think
Yeah.
that one-on-one was always very strong, and I always realized like that. I haven't always been a coach, obviously, but I was
Yeah.
also like the relationships I had with my managers, and sometimes the managers of my managers in like more hierarchical settings. Like it was always sort of, it didn't feel like I had to obey their orders or whatever. It was more like, hey, we work together, and sometimes I challenged them and coached them without having the
Right.
title of a coach. But it was just like that sense of, hey, we are equals and we work together towards reaching the goals we all want to reach in that company. So I think it just kind of that. And then it kind of like happened to roll, and team is expanding, and my experience also in startups, that kind of like all of a sudden you have a team you need to lead, and I'm like, oh, I don't even know how that works, but somehow it does. Um, so it's again probably just rolling into it without thinking too much in terms of like, hey, I want this leadership position. It was more like, hey, let's do cool stuff, and then that team
Right.
leading role came with it, so to speak.
Right. So there's like that permission to kind of be messy in that moment, right? And both of us have played in the coactive space, so like being messy in it is very much a big thing. So there was like a component of going, well, we have a destination, we've got a team. I guess let's just figure out what's going to work and how can we bring the best out of it for everybody.
And I wish when you say like the messiness and the lightness, I wish I would have seen it back then. I think I've seen it much more like when I was in it. Sometimes I had this, I rolled into it, but then I took it way too serious. Like that was kind of
Oh
like
yeah.
the funny combination of like, hey, I'm just getting into it, but then at the same time, like, damn, but now I'm in this thing, and now I have to be somebody. And I think that's a thing that, yeah, I'm like, why did I do that? Like, it could have been exactly the messiness, the lightness, all that, which I love about life. Like,
Yeah.
like that's how I roll. But all of a sudden, when I'm put on the spot, that's kind of the like I freeze and try to behave or be something or somebody I'm actually not. So that's kind of that weird combination of getting into it all of a sudden, and then that
Yeah.
quality of curiosity kind of disappears.
Right. So there's a component of like leaning into that curiosity and like allowing yourself to be the full you versus like what you think the box requires of you of that title going, all right, we're in it. Oh Lord. And like I think so many leaders and entrepreneurs can appreciate that. They're like you get all excited, you jump in it, and then it's all of a sudden you're like, oh, we're in this and we have to do this now. Who do I have to be? Keep being you and keep going through that is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, keep being you, keep exploring, and I mean, let's be clear, like there's hard skills in terms of like how to build trust and how to run
Yeah.
certain meetings, how to do good communication, how to do good feedback, for example. It's all like kind of these hard skills you can learn as a leader. Um, and then there's just but that's maybe 10 or 20% of what makes you a successful leader. And I believe 80% is really like this deep connection, this showing
Yeah.
out with all the fears, the kind of like whole like everything that's going on with you is there's something in that is also going on with your team. So showing up who you are, yeah, with the
Yeah.
war in Ukraine, which is very close by for me, like physically, and also from friends, like that's something that goes on in me, but also in my clients, in my friends and my coworkers. Like there's all these things that keep happening, and
Right.
showing up authentically, talking about that from your heart. That just makes that beautiful connection, which actually makes you a good leader in the long run.
Yeah. And then it gives those people an opportunity to know that maybe they're not alone as well, right? And if they'd be like, wow, if Miguel's is in a leadership position, being open, being curious, being vulnerable, sharing what's actually going on with him as a person versus like the hat he has to wear here, be like, does that mean I can do that too? And I imagine that like builds that richness that you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. It gives permission to other people to do the same, to show up as who they are. And I think that's like when you bring in neuroscience, like it lowers stress when they can be who they are. It kind of like
Yeah.
fosters creativity and innovation, all that kind of like the changes in your brain chemicals. That it's all. proven to work, and yet we
Yeah.
struggle so much. And I love to see like how LinkedIn is more and more also coming to a place of where people talk about their mental health challenges, for example.
Yeah.
One of the founders I was coaching throughout the past year, he had like really strong anxiety, and I think a month ago we stopped, and yesterday he announced an 8 million Series A funding for his startup. Like
Well,
you only see the good news, of course, on LinkedIn, but
yeah.
you don't see like that struggle that goes through that we have been working through for the past 12 months in order to get to also that where he can reap all the fruits. So I think
Yeah.
that's that authenticity to show up as a leader gives permission, but also allows others to be much more successful, to be much more themselves, and therefore more creative, more productive, having better ideas, and
Yeah.
doing the job basically in a much better way. And I mean, that's leadership, to enable your team to do the best job they can to reach your goals. So I mean, what better way than there to show up as who you are?
Right. And as that leader, it's like your role is to like remove roadblocks for them. So if you're learning how to do that self work of removing your own roadblocks, working with somebody like you to help do that, then that has like that ripple effect that goes out everywhere within not just their teams, but their families and their friends and everything else. And congratulations to your client as well. Like, and a big part of like why I started the show and why I still do it is like just that is like so many entrepreneurs, like so many leaders and people like put on that big show of going everything's great, here's all the wins, but like there's a lot of bumps and trips and like quote unquote failures that go on behind the scenes that would actually I think help move people more than just going, hey, here's my W. Be like, well, let's talk about all the work, the persistence, the patience, and the things that had to go into achieving that. And can you still look in yourself in the mirror and go, I still like that guy?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's beautiful work you do here as well. Like that's part of this bigger shift I see on so many. I just mentioned LinkedIn, but also in different
Yeah,
areas that people speak up. That it's kind of like when people finally find the courage to say like, "Hey, I really have a shitty day," and I have that, for example. I'm just at a co-working space right now. I told you,
yeah,
and it just had a conversation with a colleague here who's running a business as well, and like all the challenges with yeah, his family he needs to sustain, but also there's other challenges financially and like all that. But it's very hard for him to share that with his team. But he's okay
yeah,
to share that with me because I'm kind of an external partner to him. And yeah, how beautiful it would be, and then how strong the connection would be if we dare to yeah share with each other in a
yeah.
psychologically safe space to kind of just share who we are,
Oh,
what's happening. And it doesn't
yeah.
take much, but as a leader, we can take this first step to show up first, as we said before, giving permission, and then others can kind of like yeah build that connection.
Well, I think that's interesting. There is like the taking that first step and like learning what that means, right? Because like if they're not in a maybe their environment or their culture doesn't really revolve around psychological safety or even understand what that means. Is like talking about a brave space, being able to open it so everyone can go, hey, what's the boogeyman that's scaring us right now, and putting the light on it. Being able to do that with somebody like you and learn to do that is maybe then teaching them to, or hopefully teaching them, they can go back and do that with their team and start to build this, because it's not like a light switch, right? Like it doesn't just magically happen. This is like the work's never done, so it's about going through and doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. You also just mentioned culture, and there's so many areas of culture, like the culture you grew up in, the family, maybe the area you grew up in, but also the culture at the company, for example, and they all overlap.
Yeah,
And sometimes it like the first time, like I painted my nails, for example, like 2 years ago, that was like I literally I went to the gym and I thought I'm gonna die. But it's kind of like this first time is so hard to maybe share in a different space, to show up
yeah,
as who you are in a different space. Um, can be really, really hard. So maybe look for a safe space, maybe with a coach or a friend, or like to really share
yeah,
if that's hard for you. And then kind of like move gradually from there to spaces
right,
where you feel like, oh, I'm not sure how they're going to look at me.
Yeah.
And with that stepped approach, you can build that confidence in sharing what's happening, in sharing who you are, in sharing kind of like more and more of yourself. And I think that's kind of like an easy way to show up more authentically. As you said, it's not just like a light switch. From now on, I'm authentic. No, that is kind of like, for most people, it's step by step, stepping into this authenticity more and more. And even for me, who is kind of advocating for this, like, I'm like, wait, I could have shown up even more authentic, and I reflect on that. And there's always a new layer I discover about myself as well.
So there's always like the word that comes up here is practice, right? Like how do you create the space for practice, and within that practice going, it is okay to like trip and fall, to learn. It's about that being messy, and from our world, dancing in that moment. It's just like how can we be messy and still slowly getting better? Like if we're constantly doing this practice to me inherently means I'm working to improve something, or I'm trying to expand something. Maybe that's even a better place when you think about authenticity, is we want to expand that field and bring that out from us more.
Yeah, absolutely. And discovering more about who I am as well. Like there's this I said, these layers. With our clients, we discover those layers, but also in ourselves, we discover more and more of these layers. So also as a leader, I think that's to do that inner work is kind of that self-reflection to kind of learn more and more. That's all practice as well, and expanding and playing on that edge of this comfort zone, not completely outside, but also not like laying back on the beach chair, but kind of like playing and practicing on that edge to expand it and have more and more of that.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, because like actually in the last episode with Alison Ramchuk, she talked about leaning over her edge and what that has meant for her and her growth and the experience. And I find that's a real common factor with leaders when they have kind of like that aha moment, is like, oh, I don't need to be wildly out of my discomfort zone. I just need to be like a step, or like just 1 foot into it, and then it just kind of chases you the way through. Her metaphor was like, as she has this faith of putting her foot down, and the yellow brick road will form as she walks.
Yeah, I like that image a lot. And again, neuroscience shows that's where the growth lies as well. And what really has been a game changer for me in that space to dare to take these steps outside of the comfort zone is to have people around me. Sometimes I call it, Matt, it's very theoretical, but like this board of advisors, this personal board of advisors for myself, but kind of like having people around me I can bounce ideas back and forth, to have a mentor, maybe to have somebody I trust where I can be my full self and just discuss these things as well, and we connect on a personal level as well, but also on a professional level. And knowing that even if I would be out of my comfort zone, and if things go sideways, which by the way have a lot, but then I have people who got my back. I have that support network. I have people I can rely on. I know they can help me get back on my feet. They if need be, I can go back to being a waiter. Being aware of that safety net you have allows me much more to kind of take these steps outside of the comfort zone, take these risks as well.
Yeah, I love that idea of having your own personal board of advisors. And it's what's the old saying, like you're the sum of the 5 or 10 people you hang around with the most, right? And carefully building that environment, be like, hey, this is where I need the group that's going to allow me to like take the steps without the shame, right? I think there's a component of like feeling shameful for taking a step and like having it be a misstep, and there shouldn't be. Like if you're trying to stretch beyond and for all the right reasons for yourself, it's okay to like take the wrong step, and then having people that can help reflect that, work through that, and be like, hey, you tried. Are you going to get up, dust yourself off, and go again?
Yeah, and when I had my first startup in Berlin, maybe a good analogy there is like the worst thing that could happen for me, because there was money invested and my whole kind of like, I felt cool as an entrepreneur, and I was kind of like bragging around like, oh, I'm in Berlin. This is like, And the worst thing that could happen was that startup to go like bankrupt and not working. And
Yeah.
but that fear was so present because I put so much emphasis on like stuff that wasn't relevant.
Right.
That fear was so big. So, but when it happened, I was like, of course, I was like sleepless nights before and after, and tears and kind of like stress and emotional kind of like breakdowns and all that. But just like literally just maybe 2 weeks after the decision we're gonna stop, I was like, all right, okay. That's the worst thing. I was so afraid for like 9 or 12 months now that
Yeah.
yeah. So also experiencing
Ooh.
these failures, if you want to call them like
Yeah.
that, or these moments of learning, or I don't know what euphemism you want to use, but experiencing them and realizing, okay, so I don't have any money right now, but I still have friends, or I still have my partner at that time. I could just go
Yeah.
there and stay there. Um, and it's still okay to kind of rebuild from here. Um,
Oof.
Realizing it was hard, and at the same time
Yeah.
very freeing of like, okay, oh, okay, it's not, even though it's hard, it's not even the
Yeah.
end of the world. Like I was still healthy,
Right.
I still had my friends, I still had family around me. Like, so I think these professional failures, they're often, and I'm going to be honest with you, I'm happy that I didn't have any family, no kids or anything that depended on me. So that's also like I
Yeah.
think a very different. If as soon as you have kids or a family that depends on you, I think the risk is like, yeah,
It definitely
incredibly
amplifies it, right?
harder.
Like you do
Absolutely.
have a bigger stack of responsibility, but like one of the things
Absolutely.
that you mentioned in there that really stood out is like it's okay to rebuild from here.
Yeah.
And like what if that is like just one of those like mantras or statements or beliefs that people can have is like wherever it is okay to rebuild from here. You may be great or you may be in a real like tough spot and it's okay to rebuild from here. Whatever that means for you. Like it's like the shackles come off with that statement.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny that I love that statement. And I think, what I realized just when you say that, like I had this counter mantra almost in my head, but I wasn't realizing it. So I was rebuilding my life, but I still had that notion in my head of like, I will never build anything again.
Ooh.
Unconsciously, that was just very strong after that startup. So
Yeah.
I bounced back financially, I rebuilt my life. It's kind of like recovering from whatever happened. But that thing that kind of stuck in my mind in the back, and and that was, yeah, also another, it felt shameful, but at the same time very powerful. I spoke in front of maybe 100 people, also entrepreneurs. And then all of a sudden I realized like I had this, I will never build anything again. And I had tears in my eyes when I was saying that. And so many
Yeah.
people afterwards kind of came to me and said like, hey, Miguel, I relate to that because I had a startup and I kind of still carry that shame.
Right.
I don't know exactly what it is, but shame, or that kind of
Yeah.
guilt, shame of, I don't know how to do this again. So it's kind of like, it has a bigger impact that sometimes you're not even aware.
Yeah.
And at the same time that the worst thing sometimes happens and it's still okay.
Oh yeah. 100%. It's all part of the learning process and like especially in the
Yeah.
startup world. I think the book is called Startup Communities, but so it was talking about like in the Denver area in North America, like the startup community and Techstars and stuff, and they shared that they were doing this thing called a wake. So like when a startup would like close its doors, they would actually do like celebrate it with a wake, right? And like they would talk about the challenges. They bring in everybody that was part of like their accelerators and share like here's what happened, like just full open kimono. And like I think that would have been like in that area probably for all those people got to bypass a little bit of like that like holding on to like that shame for years and years and going all right, here's what happened. And like a lot of them, I guess, would bounce back, find other or other partners who were then all of a sudden going, oh, these guys can be real about what's going on. Cool. And the community just kind of embraced it and went, everything that starts had to stop from something else, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I love this idea. I wish I had that like back then, or we had that as a team. back that it just fell apart. And as often like with startups, then it's kind of like these also personal things.
Yeah.
But if you can come together and like celebrate failure, how beautiful is that? Like, absolutely. I
Yeah.
think that that's something that, yeah, should happen much more often. Maybe that's something I'm going to look at as well.
Well,
to
I think so, right? Like,
facilitate that almost. Yeah.
yeah, like what an opportunity to actually like decompress from it and like process all that, right? To know that you held that unconscious thought, oh, I'm not going to build anything, or maybe I can't build anything. If I build something, it's just going to fall down. Be like, maybe that's one perspective, right? Like, and to be able to get through that in a quicker way, and by you sharing that, it does give all those other people that permission to go, I'm not alone. Okay, good, thank God. Like, I thought it was just me. And what was it? So you had that opportunity to like process that when that thought came up while you were sharing. What was it like for you after? Was it freeing to put the light on it and see that there was like that little saboteur speaking to you in there?
Well, like the first moment was like, oh my God, I was crying in front of like these 100 super successful entrepreneurs. Like, put that
Yeah.
aside. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like with every processing of it's like having that all of a sudden made that unconscious kind of baggage, put
Yeah.
that in conscious words and being able to speak up, say these words out loud. I think absolutely that was kind of like very cathartic, like in terms of like letting it go of kind of, okay, it's out there, nothing to be ashamed of anymore. And
Yeah.
it allowed me actually to move on with a much more open mind, much more exploring, much more, um, just much more energy in terms of like trying things again. Because trying things, and especially when you're in a space where you're not just repeating the same thing over and over again, where they kind of like you're
Yeah.
doing new things. But failure should be your best friend, right? It's
Yeah.
just part of this creative process, and you do it in small portions of when you scribble something and it goes to the bin, um,
Yeah.
and you do it in bigger dimensions as well. So it's just something to embrace, and I think that helped me to kind of that like these failures along the way helped me to embrace that more. And yeah, it sounds now so easy, but that's kind of like, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago. So there's also
Yeah.
this element of time, of processing, of
Mm-hmm.
growing, of talking with people. So there's a lot of work that goes into that. It's not just, I mean, I literally sat down after my first startup crash. I literally sat down one afternoon, like a week after. I was like, I was writing down all the lessons learned, and I was like, okay, that's it. I'm done. I can move on.
Yeah.
And on like, little did I know that it takes like maybe a couple of years even to fully kind of bounce back. And that was also just me. Like there might be other people that just can't do that. For
Yeah.
me, to really kind of freeing myself from that experience and from that ego in that sense as well, that I was kind of hurt in that moment. That just took more time to
Right.
kind of get over it.
Well, and then it sounds like that wasn't the last time you had a startup though, or was it? Like it sounds like there's some other things that you were able to take from there and to grow and to build again. I'm assuming you're
Yeah,
building.
no,
I know you're building.
yeah. I mean, I always joke like that my first startup I was with 6 years old. I started baking and selling goods in the neighborhood, and
Yeah.
then went on to sell USB sticks when I was like a teenager made of wood. And then that kind of like, but that started in Berlin was the first formal one, and then I had another one here in Amsterdam. Um, and I could apply lots of learnings. Not all of them were applied right away. I had some more
Yeah.
learnings. Again, obviously, like with every kind of project, you learn some more things, also about yourself. But that kind of like then was the second startup here in Berlin, which which was like the ego part, like that kind of letting go of the ego, being like focusing more on the success of the startup versus like, I need to be the CEO, or I have to
Right.
be that, or let's fight around like 1% of shares. Like, we're just talking about like a team of 3 or 5 people. Like,
Yeah.
what are we talking about? And of course, down the road, they could make a huge impact, but at the same time, it's more important to get something going in the beginning. At least for me, that was kind of one of my learnings. Like, let's make sure this takes off. before we start fighting around like 1% of shareholders or whatever that might be.
So there's a component of like you've learned from all this. It's like, how do I go out and validate what we're doing? Is what we're doing a thing? Like, or is it just something that we enjoy doing and might not necessarily have intrinsic value to somebody else? And once we know that, then we'll put the coupling around it and go, okay, now we've got something we want to take further to a next step.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like focus on the success of the thing you're building and less that ego and personal stuff involved. And it worked much better. I think we sold it after like just a year, and we were able to sell it. So that was really nice. We were really happy with that. Also, again, there's lots of learnings around that, and still like, okay, maybe I shouldn't have started that startup after all because of the. But it's. I was happy I had these learnings from my first startup. I could be incorporated that second round as well, and more learnings for the next round, whatever that might be.
Yeah, well, it just makes you seasoned, right? Like you're able to come in with this experience, and be like, oh, I already know what the first like 6 steps are. I haven't been to step 10 yet, but I know I have the process to figure out how to get to 8, 9, and 10. Like that in itself it can be huge, right? Like been in the startup world, been starting new things in the past where it's just like bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. You're like, we're gonna do this. Oh, damn, we don't know how to like take it beyond a good idea.
Yeah. I one of my clients as well. I love that, and that's maybe also much more like the European kind of culture as we talked before versus the American culture. But he just like one startup crashed, and he realized like, hey, there's a gold nugget in there. He took that kind of data science machine. He took that new startup, next goes on again, gets funding, and continues just 3 months later.
I love it.
I so admire that. I love to kind of like, because I was like, okay, this startup is gone, so we stopped working. No. He was like, no, we just continue. Please just, and I'm like, oh yeah, exactly. I love that. But so kind of I learned from him as well that kind of that fast cycle of just learning, accepting, but also like heavy reflection. Like it's not just like la 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 la. It's like there's moments of heavy reflection in these moments, but then he's realizing like, hey, there was something that worked. Let's take this and move on. So I think that's this fearlessness I often talk about is that really embodies that beautifully on all levels.
Yeah. Well, like building fearless leaders who do what they want and love what they're doing is like that's part of your motto. Like how did that like become? How did you birth that? Like when you were like, oh, this is the thing, and then through coaching, this is how I help people become this.
So full transparency, I change my motto maybe every 2 months.
Now I don't feel so
like
bad.
Exactly. Now, there's also that a continuous like you try something, you tweak it, you test it. Like it's that continuous approach, and it I grow as a person. I grow as a coach. I grow as a leader. I think there's that intense journey, like that's just especially in the startup context. If you work for yourself, like you know that as well with these podcasts, you probably have such a steep learning curve. Every time you talk with somebody, you learn something again. There's this growth. There's this self-reflection. So I change. So also what I offer and how I show up in the world changes and adjusts. For example, 4 weeks ago, I started taking Lion's Mane. It had a huge effect on how I show up and communicate with people already. Like, I'm like, this is weird, but it shifts things around, and there's much more things that's happening, and then we all grow. Pandemic, we learned so much about ourselves and how society and we connect with each other. Like, there's such a high pace of growth that I have been through, and I think many people have been through over the past years. And although it might not feel like growth, I think we just started to realize and digest and realize like how much, at least for me, that's something I am unpacking, how much I have been growing and how do I relate and react in certain areas. So that showing up of also shifts and changes. And for now, it's building fearless leaders. I work with leaders.
Yeah.
I love that context of leadership, because it amplifies the work I do as well. It gives
Right.
when I work with people in startups or leading corporate teams, then there's always that a little bit of a heightened urgency almost, because there's a team around it that depends on them, the stakeholders. That I love that kind of like, it brings that next level of okay, let's make sure we really take this serious, not in a serious way, but in a okay, there's meaning to this, and let's make sure like the motivation and the energy is different in that space.
Right. So it sounds like there's a bit of like a call. The work that you're doing is helping people see the calling beyond just themselves.
Absolutely. I think that's probably Simon Sinek said it. I don't know. He said so many things that the best leaders are also the best followers, that follow a calling, that follow an idea, that follow maybe other people, but kind of like do this without the ego, but from a as I say, calling from, hey, there's something that I want to achieve that's bigger than just me, that's bigger than just like my personal development, but like there's something around it that's even more important that we're building together.
Right, and that's what helps get people out of bed in the morning, right? It's like, what is that calling above just themselves, right? And to have that, it's like you get pulled towards it and attracted to it all the time.
Absolutely. And I think when I reflect on my journey like that with both my startups, that wasn't really reflected. I wasn't really in it for that bigger calling. I was just like enjoying it, and there was a problem, and I was happy to solve that. And what I do now is really that to see that positive change of authentic leaders, how that can impact companies, and that can shift, especially when you have growing companies, like how important that can be, and that really motivates me to go beyond my own comfort zone when I start challenging my clients as well, to not just like do what they have been doing a little bit better. No, let's look for the radical leap here. Let's look for the bold change as well that might be necessary, but that also takes courage and boldness from me. And naturally, I'm not built like that, but I know that that's needed, and that's kind of like how I show up also with different senses, of course, with my clients, but that's kind of like challenging aspect, challenging my clients to really step up. That's something that is combined or comes from this calling, as you say, from achieving something better and bigger.
Yeah, bold and courageous is like, those are values that they're actually in my reframed mantra as well, but they sit on my little wheel of life down below. It's like, what can we accomplish from this place of boldness and from a place of courage, and how are we facing that courage in a daily process? Is like, I think the courage is like, I think you almost have to have them both side by side, this boldness and this courage, to be like, I'm going to take this step, and the courage to be like, I don't know where it's going to go, but I think I'm willing to go and find out. It's like, for me, I see that the courage is like the unknown, right? Like, are you willing to like go to the unknown? And those who are, get some really great rewards for it, and some important learning opportunities. I like to strip the word failure out of it. Is like, it's straight up learning, if you choose it to be.
You have to make the translation from failure, falling on your nose, and you have to. There's work involved. It's not just all of a sudden it's there. No, you have to make the translation effort. And once you've done it, I think you also shed in the process. You can let go of the shame, and you're ready to take another step into the unknown. And I think that's a beautiful development you can see for yourself. I see it for myself, but I think also what I see from you, you take a step every day, and with every conversation, you take a leap of faith as well with your interview partners. They're kind of like, how is it going to show up? Like a bold step to move forward again and again.
Well, and you just never know where they're going to go, right? And as I'm just like looking up, I'm like, we're at 40 minutes, man. Like we hit the clock, and I want to still be respectful of your time. And when we started it, we had no idea if this was going to make 40 minutes, but we had to have the faith and the courage and the boldness to step into it. And I think we just had a beautiful conversation around what it truly means to be a leadership and to appreciate the failures that come through it and flip those into learning opportunities. As we kind of like get to this last little bit of like wrapping up, is there anything about like, it sounds like reflection is a big piece to your process and what you've learned and taken away from it. Is there any last little nuggets that you'd like to share about reflection to the crowd?
I think when I reflect, what I could have used, like that don't take it too serious, like that messiness we talked about as well, that chaos that you can embrace. Take that, go with that. So don't make it like a huge thing. Bring the lightness, bring the seriousness, and bring that together, and then just say it as it is, and go from there. I think that simplicity and that honesty, I think that's a really important step to, in order to move forward in whatever direction that is.
That's awesome. And I think a lot of people can take that piece and start to work that into their own reflection process. So before we let you go, is there any shout outs that we can give you here, and any shout outs that you'd like to put out there?
What do you mean? I'm sorry. How do you?
Oh, a shout out is like call out to like what your what is it we can promote for you? Like what are you working on right now that we can share with the world?
Oh, like that. Thank you. That's just translating English from a European to a. So right now I'm working on a program for coaches, actually, because I know how hard it sometimes is around these business building areas, and that's something I have luckily with lots of failures, learnings, reflection, and help from others, I've really put under my feet over the past couple of years, and that's something I'm passing on right now. So I'm building that program for coaches, actually, and any kind of service provider, consultants that kind of want to take their as we talked about bold steps, right? That's kind of at the core of it. Like, so really take these bold steps to take your business forward as well.
Nice.
So that's something that if you're interested, I'm happy to talk to you about that.
So what is the best way to connect with you for people that are interested in that?
LinkedIn is a great way, or my website, miguelbaumann.com. That's something that really, that's an easiest way to find all my contact details.
Perfect.
To reach out.
Awesome. And all those are in the show notes down below. All right, man. So before we let you go, I ask every guest the same question. We're going to hop into my time machine. We're going to go back 10 years. When we open that door, you get to give yourself one piece of advice. What would that be?
Oh, wow. 10 years ago. It sounds so cliche, but it will all be fine. Like, have more fun, dance more, celebrate more. It will all be fine. So if you're very serious or having fun on the way, it doesn't really make a difference. So you can also have fun. So do that.
I love it. Don't take it so serious, and have more fun and dance along the way. I think those are great parting words, man. Well, thank you so much for being our guest on episode 84. To everybody else who's watching, thanks for tuning in. As always, I'm Gene, the Coactive Coach. This is LiveCast Conversations With, and we will see you all next Wednesday.